Hello, you're watching TelecomTV's third annual summit on Open RAN and our panel discussion on figuring out the total cost of ownership of Open RAN. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. Open RAN introduces not only new network architectures and vendor mixes, but also unfamiliar capex and opex models. So is it possible to prove that Open RAN has a lower total cost of ownership when compared with traditional network builds? Well, with the help of today's guests, we are going to find out. And joining me on the programme today are Aitor Garcia Viñas, RAN Strategy and Planning Manager at Vodafone, Paul Miller, Chief Technology Officer with Wind River, Arun Bhamidimarri, who is Principal Programme Manager at Microsoft, and Francis Haysom, Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. Hello everyone, very good to see you all, and thanks so much for taking part in this discussion. Now, first of all, is it true that Open RAN systems can be more cost effective than traditional mobile networks when total cost of ownership is taken into consideration? Arun, let me ask you this first. Is this a safe assumption for us to make?
Look, Open RAN systems, they aim to diversify the supply chain, enabling a broader ecosystem of equipment providers to provide solutions where operators can now choose and mix and match the most cost-effective and best-in-breed class products. For example, you could start using, the technology enables you to use commercial off-the-shelf servers. The TCO in general should also be looked at in conjunction with the new revenue opportunities that can be presented when the same compute servers that are running the network functions can also be used for edge compute applications. It's huge opportunity. It's a huge potential for overall TCO. But we should also recognize that there's a lot of work ahead for us, ahead of us to realize this potential, namely the operational efficiency. So, the power consumption of the Open RAN networks should be at par with the legacy networks. The ability to manage such disaggregated tools with automation, AI ops, and machine learning needs to be there. We need an ecosystem of players coming together to address these areas, and we see a strong momentum in these areas. The likes of operators like Vodafone leading the way. We have the positive momentum being done in Open RAN Alliance and TIP, and some government initiatives with like the UK DCMS Future RAN Challenge. So yeah, there is immense potential, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Thanks, Arun. And as you say, it's a complicated picture, this. There's a lot of moving parts. Francis, what are you seeing? I mean, this initial setup, is it a safe assumption that we're making here?
I think we need to consider really there's two ways in which we can look at the TCO. There is obviously, is it cheaper than what I have at the moment? And definitely the supply chain elements of that one and the commoditized hardware, certainly in some parts of the Open RAN network are ones that can drive a lower TCO in the terms that CSPs are used to at the moment. But I think a far more important characteristic in terms of the ultimate TCO for Open RAN is going to be that of innovation. I've just come from Mavenir's Analyst conference, and whilst you can say they would say that, wouldn't they? But they're saying there's a very much different conversation being had with CSPs now from 2 years ago, which was it was very much about cost, much more towards innovation. And I think ultimately, just like some of the previous Gs, we have to recognize that sometimes you're investing in order that you can do more. You can make more revenue, or you can make yourself more tailored for a particular enterprise segment, etc. And that all comes from innovating on what you can do with Open RAN that you cannot do with closed Open RAN. So I think the TCO, there's definitely the potential for good TCO savings just in terms of the pure using commoditized hardware. But the real saving, the real TCO savings, or more importantly, actually, the opportunities that drive that can be driven from Open RAN are going to be some of the ones that will ultimately make the TCO case much more powerfully.
Thanks, Francis. It brings us on to our next point here, and that is just how important is the cost consideration for network operators, and whether or not it's the number one metric, or if there are other more important considerations. Paul, let's get your thoughts first on this one, because I think there can be a danger of, like, we're changing the narrative for the sake of it sometimes. But what's the reality that you're seeing? Are there other more important considerations than just pure cost?
We certainly think there are, but on this TCO topic, you really have to consider the life cycle of the network. And fundamentally, O-RAN significantly changes the commercial model and business environment that a service provider has within this paradigm. Fundamentally, if you look at the disaggregation that happens with virtualization, there's now competition for the life of the network, where you have hardware vendors continuously vying for that business throughout the lifetime of the network, versus the legacy approach with appliances, where you might have competition at the front end of the network build, but then locked in vendors for the duration of that lifetime. Even at the application layer, even at the vRAN application layer, you now have the ability through an orchestrator to push button change the vendor that's deployed in your network. And this creates a highly competitive business environment where the service provider now has a tremendous amount of business leverage over the vendors within their network. This drives TCO down dramatically. We're also seeing that if you perform a 5 or 10 year TCO, as our customers often do, they're introducing new capabilities as a result of cloudification. Cloudification drives things like automation and analytics and AI and ML ops for the operation of the network. The ease of new service deployment. Arun mentioned a moment ago the ability to deploy new services, right, that make use of edge compute paradigms. These are tremendous revenue generators now for the carrier, that if you go with a legacy approach, you cannot deploy those applications at the edge of the network. You have to have a cloudified infrastructure. We've also seen that one of our customers that's deployed a vRAN network at high scale, Verizon in the United States, Bill Stone, their VP of Technology Development and Planning, was last year quoted as saying, "I stand extremely firmly on the side in that we would not be deploying it if it wasn't as good or better than what we have in place today." So I think in a lot of cases where carriers have taken that deep dive, they've discovered the benefits of O-RAN and have thus really put their energy behind it.
Thanks, Paul. Aitor, you're our carrier representative on this panel today, so I'd be interested in your thoughts. Cost is obviously very, very important, but as Paul just said there, there's no point doing this if it's not as good as or better than what we've currently got. So, from your perspective, is cost the most important metric, or are there other more important considerations?
So thanks for the questions. Basically, Vodafone. First of all, Vodafone is not doing this Open RAN because of cost as being the first metric. We understand that the cost improvement will come over the time, basically because it's a factor to consider, and basically we need a scale and mass deployments to happen and so on, right? What is more important is create the right level of competition, opening the boxes, understanding what is there. So when we open a box, and right now it has not been easily to open the boxes and see what is inside. It could be a radio unit, it could be a digital unit, it could be even a software. We don't exactly know what has been there. Traditional vendors have been designing and developing models and equipment that at the end the mobile network operators are getting just as if those ones were to be the best that we could be getting, no? So when you open the boxes, basically you see there is a world when you can talk about the different components being more or less efficient. And at the end, when you start improving each of these components, you innovate, you put the best of each component and get gains. Overall, you are getting gains all over when you produce something, no? So you don't stick here to something that is something in the middle. You just talk to many partners, and you make sure that what you are getting is based on what is best in the industry. So somehow, I mean, the quality and the competition gets bigger, and somehow everybody tries to do the best to improve what is existing. Okay. Apart from that, there is a resiliency concept, right? So bringing new ideas will innovate and will encourage innovation. So, for example, in the past, Vodafone and other entities in the industry have been setting many requirements. Those requirements were being considered by different traditional vendors, and in many cases they were discarded. And what is worse, in some cases, even small and medium companies and educational entities, probably they were having very good ideas, but not always could be implemented in the traditional RAN scenarios or environments. No? With Open RAN, the possibilities are great because basically the research and innovation is a possibility. Everybody can introduce something in the existing end-to-end system. So at the end, the end customer will get the benefit out of it. The last point is with open architectures, we are capable to get better APIs, access to different interfaces, and somehow the world of a platform or network as a platform use cases can be improved. And in a way as well, having code servers closer to the customer are allowing the customer itself to get data closer to where it is. So some use cases demanding low latency can be better applied from our point of view with Open RAN. So cost is important. It will happen, but first is innovation, competition, consistent improvement, and cost with mass deployments and so on will come sooner than later.
Thanks, Aitor. Well, it sounds, Francis, very much like the cost benefits will follow the other key metrics that operators are hunting for.
Yes, I think the core point is also to think about TCO. We tend to start thinking about TCO about what do we know today really about the way we run the network. I think the important thing about, and I build on Paul's comment about the opportunity in increment, the ability to constantly change. It's not just that we're able to constantly change, but we're able to constantly adapt to the reality of the network. We don't, taking an ancient example, we don't know when the next Pokemon Go is going to happen. And the being tied to what is effectively programmed in silicon in a lot of RANs at the moment is not necessarily the best way to adapt to a new Pokemon Go, as it were, whereas software is the ability to do that. So we're by implementing an Open RAN, we're in a much better place to take those incremental cost improvements, but also making sure that the costs of addressing a new service, a new opportunity in the market, we're able to react to that rather than having to wait for the next 5 years of merchant specific ASIC silicon from a traditional vendor.
Sure. Thanks, Francis. And Arun, you'd like to follow up on some of the comments that Francis and Aitor have just mentioned?
Very, very briefly, I think all the panelists said, exactly 100%, and we completely agree with them. Just want to say, we see the success of Open RAN kind of three pillars. One is, of course, cost. As Aitor mentioned, over time it will mature. Second is, you have to have the ability to have an ecosystem of silicon and OEMs that provide better power efficiency and stuff. So your operational expense has to be addressed. That comes with, of course, power efficiencies, but also with the automation, zero touch automation, and AI ML based AI ops, which can manage this multi-vendor environments. So I think it's a combination of success metrics, and I think those are three pillars. And then last but not the least, is the performance. The performance of the networks, the Open RAN networks, again, as Aitor mentioned, will mature over time. It should not. We have to set a benchmark that it does not lag behind the traditional RAN networks.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you all for your responses to that question. Brings us to our next one, because we are focused on TCO in this particular panel. Aitor, how can the TCO of an Open RAN deployment be estimated when there's just no current long-running case studies? I mean, Vodafone, for example, is leading the way here, one of the operators that's really leading the way, but we don't have a lot to learn from yet, a lot to guide us. So is it a case that we're just estimating TCO at this stage?
Yeah, so TCO is a concept that basically, everybody talks high level about the TCO and no one is going into the details, no? So the problem is when going into the details, you may see the difficulties. So deployments are happening worldwide, and basically before deployment, you need to go through RFQ processes and understand in reality how the different multi-vendors are going to be matching into those deployments. This basically means about going through requirements, compliancy, and commercial approaches. So once you have been running that and you realize that is a difficult task to be done, then you see how the TCO somehow is distributed, let's say, no? So you need to see which component is going to be more important on the TCO to later on prioritize that component which has more impact and make sure that at the end you put the effort probably there to reduce the TCO. So we are quite often seeing some entities stating that there's going to be a TCO reduction, like maybe 30% right now and so on. In reality, we have been running through RFQ processes to select our first UK deployment last 2021. It was a tough process where we selected vendors. We are very happy that we got a very good deal. I cannot comment whether it's better or worse. I can say it's good enough and it's quite in line with what we were expecting. And then after this process, and unfortunately it's not something that we can disclose openly, but we are discussing in some specific cases with key partners and so on. So we realized that, for example, if I can say something, hardware is the biggest component of what we see. Particularly the radio units are still, as in the traditional world, taking a huge impact or huge component in the TCO. Radio units and energy is almost 50% of the total TCO. So when we realize that, automation is important because it will be improving integration and so on. But then first, let's go for hardware, radio units, digital units, and energy, which is important over the time. In this sense, so for example, we are discussing with different tier 1, tier 2 vendors in the industry. We try to understand the designs. We discuss on each component how is the benefit, how the component and the different parts in the digital units and radio units are going to be evolving over the time. So we have a plot of in the different years how the technologies are going to be improving. So maybe the picture right now is X, but we know that in the next 3 to 5 years it's going to be perfectly better at a certain percentage. No, we understood as well when having these discussions with different industry players that the chips and the different entities inside the radio unit are something that are key, and that's why, for example, Vodafone is opening the first R&D center to develop chips in Malaga, and that's something that Vodafone was not doing before. Before we were putting requirements, we were understanding that the technical requirements were important, but also commercial discussions. Now we know that running and discussing with the right players, telling them what they should be doing or expecting to be done, because we know or we understand how the technology should be evolving, is going to be key to deliver the promised TCO reduction over the next years. I don't want to say that other factors are not important, because RIG applications are going to be disruptive and they are going to be a key factor as well to run innovation in many aspects, like, for example, RIG and other talking to chips directly, improving efficiency, and at the end that's a cost benefit. For example, for energy efficiency, that could be a use case. Automation is something key whenever you are deploying massively and having big deployments to make sure that everything runs smooth. So true, we need to learn a lot. What we what we really need to do is discuss more often and more openly about what kind of key breakthrough technologies need to happen to make sure that at the end somehow we are aligned in the future to develop products and so on that are going to be reducing the TCO.
Aitor, thanks very much. You raise a number of very interesting, fascinating points there, and it looks like all our other panelists want to come in on this particular question. So, Paul, let me come across to you first for your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think while we may not have industry reports that give us the ability to really look at that type of data, we do now have experience, right? We've been in deployment for 1.5 years in the US with vRAN, with Verizon. We've done Europe's first O-RAN deployment with Vodafone in the UK. They've been a tremendous partner there. And even recently, the interview on TelecomTV with Iago Tenorio stating that by 2030, they expect to have 30% of their network over to O-RAN. So I think a lot of the business case and justification behind O-RAN is being proven. Certainly, there are difficulties, right? The impacts of the initial deployment, the capex components, those are easy to size up. What's more difficult to achieve is modeling the longer-term opex savings from analytics and AI and machine learning benefits, automation, and orchestration capabilities that come with cloudification. But if you can get that impacts in capex to the point where you're breaking even or better with the current approach, those future capabilities, as well as the ability to deploy new services on a virtualized framework to generate additional revenue, just become gravy effectively. They give you the ability to build more revenue and drive the cost down of the network over time. So as we work with carriers, we're seeing that kind of modeling where there's a lot of pricing pressure at the front end of the network build, but there's a realization that the future of the network is really driven to lower costs and more flexibility from this approach.
Thank you, Paul. Let me turn now to Arun. As Aitor mentioned, there's a lot of detail there. When you start unpacking this, there's a lot of detail and facts to factor in to TCO. What are your thoughts on this question?
I mean, I just believe that building a TCO model in isolation is probably not the right thing. I think we need operators, network function providers, as well as cloud service providers like the platform providers like ourselves, to be combining forces to develop such a model. I mean, we are very interested in collaborating in developing such a model. There are good white papers out there. I think, Paul, your team has done excellent work, and I think that's something that we should build upon. I think there's good work that's been done by Vodafone. There's good work done by ecosystem players here that we should collectively build upon. I think, Paul, your experience is very, very, very valuable for the ecosystem here. I think one of the lessons that we believe that is true, that you can start realizing the benefits of virtualization today while the ecosystem of openness and open interfaces continues to mature, and the benefits can be further. So I think it, again, as I mentioned, it's a model that we have to develop together and not in isolation.
Thanks, Arun. And Francis, as Arun said, it needs partnerships. It needs collaboration to properly develop this model. Is that what you're seeing? Yeah,
I'd agree with Arun specifically. Building a TCO model for Open RAN doesn't really actually take, Open RAN as a replacement for what we do already is probably the smallest part of the problem. And to some extent, we can ask the same problem, not just of Open RAN, but the whole of 5G, actually. As an analyst, I would say that one of the things we are expected to be able to do is to forecast what we want to happen, or what will happen in the future. There are models for estimating operational costs. There are models for estimating innovation out there that telcos can use. They're widely used in other industries. The challenge with those models is it really requires that sort of vision from the CSP or the vendor in terms of what is possible. What do I want to achieve in many cases, it's much more about what do I want to achieve in operational savings from Open RAN will actually drive those savings, rather than I have a model which says Open RAN will inherently make those operational savings, particularly when operational savings are often tied to organizational structure and the way things are operated. And innovation is similarly tied to the willingness to partner with others, the willingness to expose to others. So a lot of it, I think, is going to be driven. The TCO is going to be driven by having a vision which drives that TCO.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, good points. And Paul, you wanted to make an extra comment?
Yeah, just very quickly, I found it interesting what Arun said. Really, it's worth emphasizing when he spoke about the partnerships are critical. As you bring Open RAN into a service provider, it's a complex disaggregated solution, both north-south and east-west. And working with partners, for example, like Microsoft, where you can bring in the best of the hyperscaler capabilities down to the edge, where we're perhaps working with O-RAN VDU workloads or in a highly distributed system. This really creates the best possible solution for a service provider from the core to the edge of the network. So I just wanted to comment that we think partnerships and pre-integration of solutions prior to entering the customer network is really important to O-RAN.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and as you mentioned, the pre-integration being part of this equation as well. Well, Arun, let me come straight back to you because I'm curious about what the main breakthroughs that we still are looking for in order to reduce total cost of Open RAN deployments, what they might be, and also the role that public and private cloud platforms can have in assessing the overall TCO.
Sure. No particular order. Number one, the ecosystem around Open RAN radio units is still kind of immature. I think we need to have a high quality radio units that are pre-validated with VCU VD providers that has to mature. Second, the supply chain of silicon and server OEMs providing solutions that addresses power efficiency needs to mature as well. I think they're on a very good trajectory. I think it needs to be further along. Number three, there is a lot of apprehensions around security of virtualized networks like this. I think there are probably a lot of things that we should contribute together, should be addressed. And last but not the least, it's a strong portfolio of AI ops solution powered by, as Paul mentioned, pre-validated solutions with automation and AI ML solutions. I think I believe these are the four areas broadly. As a cloud service provider, cloud service providers, we believe as intelligent edge and intelligent cloud together, we believe telecom networks are going to be a hybrid networks. And as cloud solution providers, we aim to provide a common cloud experience, regardless of whether the network functions are running on public cloud or at the edge. That's enabling a strong portfolio of, say, for example, security solutions and best practices that we have been using in cloud that can be extended into the edge where Open RAN and the virtualized RAN network functions are going to be there. Lastly, the strong automation and AI ML solutions that cloud service providers can bring will add value in the overall TCO.
Thank you, Arun. Francis, there's a long list of technology breakthroughs and innovations and ways to move forward that we heard from Arun there. What are your thoughts? What are we looking at? And also the role of cloud and what that might play.
I actually think the biggest breakthrough isn't actually technology here. I think I come back to my previous point. The biggest breakthrough will be the CSPs that take that kind of, I want to use the opportunity from Open RAN. I want to use the opportunity from public cloud to make my business different, whether that's more operationally efficient or more innovative. That's for me is the key breakthrough. The technology will come. The hardware will evolve, will become better, become faster, and better software will be developed on the Open RAN platform. But how do I take that opportunity forward is the key breakthrough. And I'd make two, in terms of Open RAN, very much the poster children for it are Rakuten. Rakuten, its key innovation, if you like, or breakthrough, is recognizing it cannot enter the Japanese market as a fourth MNO without a completely different operational cost model. And similarly, Dish in the US are looking to use a completely different sort of innovation platform by basing their whole platform on public cloud. Now, the jury is out on that one, but those are the kind of initiatives that I think will be the bigger breakthroughs that will change things in this industry and ultimately make the TCO argument.
Sure. Thanks, Francis. And that's what we're looking for here. It's what is the TCO argument. Paul, is it the case then that we as an industry are looking for leadership from the operators and new initiatives and how they're going to take this and use it?
I think that's certainly a piece of it, but there is a couple of other components. It is incumbent upon the vendors in this ecosystem to provide the best possible technology. We found that without getting down to a single core of consumption on the edge node, or getting down to a single edge node to optimize the footprint for a VDU, or having an ultra low latency environment on that platform, you have a very difficult time competing with the legacy solution. So you do have to have a strong, firm technology foundation upon which to host this. The other piece, though, is recognize what a service provider has to go through to actually deploy and operate these systems. It's one thing to have a technology platform that's stable and appropriate for the technology, but then try to operate on a day-to-day basis. You need automation, AI, and machine learning to look across this highly disaggregated and geo-distributed cloud infrastructure that then hosts the Open RAN components. And that's a significant challenge operationally for service providers to move to. So bringing both operational tools like that, automation, orchestration, analytics, as well as, frankly, personnel that have experience in architecting and deploying these systems become really critical to enable the success of Open RAN. So it certainly is tied to the service provider being willing and justifying the business case to move in this direction. We're seeing that ground shift now in 2022 as many operators go to deploy this technology. But having the right technology foundation as well as operational tools and expertise, we think is really important.
Thanks, Paul. Well, let me stay with you for a moment. What about external factors that are impacting Open RAN decisions? What's the impact of the current component shortage and also the rising cost of energy? What are these having on Open RAN cost models?
Yeah, it's certainly a interesting set of problems that we have going on here globally with supply chain and COVID impacts and that sort of thing. We're actually not seeing, from the supply chain perspective, significant cost impacts. It's more about the ability to get the time to market quickly. Can you get enough server nodes to deploy at scale? And so really it's affecting the rate of adoption of ORAN and the rate of deployment of ORAN as supply chain introduces availability issues for both silicon accelerator cards, intelligent NICs, server platforms, networking equipment. It's pervasive, right? And you can't ignore the impact of that. But I'd really say it's not so much a cost impact as it is a speed impact, right? The energy factor is quite a different animal, though, right? And we don't really expect that to come down in the near or midterm. So having some important architectural capabilities to, for example, minimize the number of VDU sites that you need a network deployment to consume, or maximizing the sector antenna coverage for a particular VDU instance. What can we do in the technology to optimize energy consumption while it's running in this new architecture? We have significantly more flexibility in a cloud-based architecture to take some of these advantages that really reduce energy consumption at the edge of the network. And as we know, at the edge, there is upwards of 100,000 sites or more in many carriers. So there's a tremendous energy impact. It's a significant factor in the total TCO of the network. And so action has to be taken quite proactively from all the vendors involved to optimize energy consumption.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Aitor, you mentioned earlier in our conversation about the hardware costs and the energy costs as being part of TCO. As energy rises, the cost of energy rises, is this having any impact on your strategic planning for Open RAN cost modeling?
Yeah, so it's an issue, an incremental issue that is happening. It's not only for Open RAN. So most of the network that we have is the legacy network or traditional RAN network. And basically, if you check how the different products has been evolving over the time, you see for the past and obviously now the technology is better. So the new coming products are much more efficient than the ones that were some time ago. The problem that we are facing in some mobile network operators is that basically the existing products in our networks are already quite old, no? So they need some level of modernization, or the energy increase or energy cost impact is going to be significant. So the problem is not only for Open RAN. It's basically the problem is in the traditional RAN, because either we modernize as much as we can the networks, or the cost is going to be very high. So for me, instead of seeing this A bad thing for Open RAN, I see the opposite, because it's like the opportunity, right? I need to modernize my networks, and I will need to consider alternatives to existing networks. So basically, Open RAN is an opportunity. It's about seeing when the opportunity needs to happen. Is it now, or is it in a couple of years? That's a different thing, and when we are going to be prepared for that. But what I want to say that in the next 2-3 years, I may need to modernize quite a lot to reduce the OPEX due to energy, and Open RAN indeed will take a role.
Thank you, Aitor. And we do like turning a negative into a positive. That's great news for the Open RAN community there. Francis, some thoughts from you about the external factors that may be affecting the situation?
Yeah, I'd like to build on Aitor's comment about energy. I think it's a huge opportunity actually for Open RAN. I remember at the DSP Leaders conference that you held, one of the key points was actually at the end of the day, most of the 70% of the energy in the network is in the radio. A lot less is in the baseband, the Open RAN technology. So the opportunity in introducing software into both the baseband that Open RAN gives from many sources, the opportunity to optimize the use and the power up and power down of radios is a huge opportunity for software. And where that is driven by software rather than being built into the hardware, that's an opportunity for lots of people in an open way collaborating to make energy efficiency gains. And often those energy efficiency gains will be very specific to the operator, the context of things, rather than a generic solution for a global solution from a single network provider.
Thank you, Francis. Nicely said. I think we've just got time to squeeze in one final question. Arun, I'm going to come to you first on this one. Should network operators focus on small cell-based densification, whether indoor private network deployments to start with, to gain experience and also insight into TCO and Open RAN operational costs?
Well, it can be a good approach. It can be a good approach that should be considered because that can firstly give you some insights into benefits and challenges of what Open RAN can provide or cannot provide. It can also give you some good experience into performance and operations aspects. However, we do believe the main gains out of this is going to come from the macro world. So potentially a two-pronged approach would be more beneficial, where you have the lesser stringent requirements on the enterprise networks, but then more stringent requirements on the macro. But working together in a two-pronged approach where you have a common set of solution, a common solution that addresses both segments, and gain the lessons learned from one to the other would be very valuable.
Arun, thank you very much for that. And Paul, some final comments from yourself?
Sure, thanks, Guy. We don't actually agree with that. The private 5G and the local network opportunity is a completely different network stack, if you will. It's a 5G SA core that's usually put into an enterprise, has a completely different model and scale for how that network is deployed, and doesn't really give the operator the deep understanding they need to run a completely disaggregated geo-distributed network, which is what O-RAN really is. From 5G core at the center of the network through UPF, CU, DU, and RU all the way to the edge, that's usually deployed over hundreds or thousands of sites as a single aggregated network. That's a completely different animal than a private 5G network. However, Arun is correct. There's no reason not to do these in parallel, where you can build a great enterprise business with private 5G opportunities in manufacturing and campus and airport environments. Great business opportunities there, but it shouldn't be viewed as a path or a stepping stone to O-RAN. O-RAN at the macro network is really where the benefit is and the experience comes from.
Great. Thanks for those comments, Paul. We are out of time. We must leave our discussion there. I'd like to thank all of you very much indeed for taking part in the program today and sharing your views and expertise. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our summit on Open RAN, then please do send us your questions and we'll answer them in our live after show program later today. And do take part in our online poll. This is a question we are asking, along with the various answer choices. Just select whichever ones you think are the most important. We'll take a look at the votes during the after show. Don't forget to view the other panel discussions and keynote interviews in this year's summit. But for now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.